Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Romans Education Part 1, and this is Session 16. We were talking about, I was getting us to those last four words. We're actually talking about the two hints here. If Paul doesn't define it in Romans 12, then what would we do? We don't find that exact phrase anywhere else. And so what I would say is the next step is you'd have to think of the context. This is the Romans Education for a son. So you would know that this would have to be found somewhere back there to where you were told you were a son forward, right? I mean, just by context, you would kind of figure that much out. And that means that that would be somewhere between Romans chapter 8, verse 14 to 39. Because that 14 and 15 is where you were oriented to being a son. 16 to 39 is your establishment as a son. So if you're going to be told something about the measure of faith with regard to your sonship education, you would think that would be the first place that I would look. Now, doesn't that narrow that down from that big portion of Bible that you had? And so you should be able to go back there and take a look at that. As for hint number 2, if God has given us measure of faith to every man, then that means that we all have it. Now, the commentators were right. This is God that has dealt that to us, and He has dealt it to every man. And if we all have it, then what we know that is true is that we're all the same in whatever this measure of faith is. And when I told you in the last session, this is how we'll pick it back up, that God is really setting up an equality among the saints here. This is something we all have in common. So think with me just for a moment before I just flat out tell you what it is. I know Sandy gave me the speech at the break. I got it from him too. Now Karen's giving it to me. I think y'all are working in concert to, okay, so, yeah, no one in any discord. So before I just flat out tell you what it is, and you'll see it, let me say the things that will make this understandable for you. Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, I was going to ask you, if you know that we all have this in common, just think with me for a moment. Don't worry about the context. What do we all have in common? Okay, let's just put it up here. We're all heirs of, we are heirs of God, aren't we? Well, okay. What else do we have in common? We're all adopted. That's good. This is good. What else do we have in common? That's it. No, that's not it. Okay, we're all part of the body. Okay. Okay. Oh, that's good. We have the same hope. Anything else? Okay, I'm trying to think how I'm going to put this up here. Don't think about what you're being given right now. Think about, that's not wrong, think about something you've already been given that you would find back there in Romans 8, 14 to 39. Oh. This marker, what am I doing? We're all going to be delivering the creature. This is great. This is great. No, it's not a trap. The redemption of our body. Look, we have all of this up there. Look, you've hit it, but I don't know if you know you hit it. Because you knew that. Remember what I said? You're going to say, oh, I knew that. But this is going to refine it for you so that you actually understand what it is that you knew. Okay? So, of all these possible answers, one of these is the thing that we've been talking about. I mentioned one to you early on. In fact, let me go ahead and put this up that Bud mentioned, the redemption of our body. Remember, I also mentioned to you the fact that because of, well, here's what I found back there. Let me just give you the verse. When I was looking at this, here's the verse that I first felt, my eyes first fell on. He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all. See, that phraseology made me think, oh, there's an every man issue, right? I mean, you know all of those are for every man. It didn't have to say that in there. But it said he delivered him up for us all. And I thought, that's kind of what was already in my mind, thinking about, hey, if other members of the body of Christ, no matter how they feel about me, if my Heavenly Father delivered up His own Son, spared not His own Son, but delivered Him up for them, how am I supposed to view them? That really did have an impact on me. But it wasn't what the measure of faith was. Although I can't say that I just read that and it didn't impact me at all, it impacted me greatly, and I think it impacts you too. I think that none of that's in there for no reason, of course. But that wasn't what it was. So now let me take you back to Romans 12:3. God hath dealt this. We covered that, and so I'm really not after that verse. I'm after this. God hath dealt to every man not a measure of faith, but the. And what is the difference between saying a and saying the? If he said he has dealt to every man a measure of faith, you know what that means? It could mean that you got a different measure than someone else got. But if he says, I've dealt to every single one of you without exception the measure of faith, then you know what this is? It's the exact same for every single one of us. There's no and that's the critical difference that those commentators were kind of missing when they were saying it right. Let's don't get proud and haughty and measure ourselves by all these things that we have in the world, but let's just really look at what God is doing for us with regard. See, and that kind of smacks of the same thing. So the point is, He has dealt to every man, now you need to catch up with this in my notes, the measure of faith. And that means that there's a single measure that was given to every one of us. He has given, now if He's given it to every one of us, you mentioned it, He gave us all an inheritance. Well, that's not it. And He gave us all the adoption. And although that impacts you, that's not what the measure of faith is. In order to understand what that is, and I just need to get you to it so that we can talk about it, let me just take you to the next verse. The measure of faith. The measure of faith, folks. Please remember everything I've said to you, is an English idiom. What is an idiom? This is where the commentators, this is what they missed. I'm going to give it to you on the PowerPoint. An idiom is a phrase where the words together have a meaning that is different from the dictionary definitions of the individual words. We use idioms. I use them all the time, and I bet so do you. Let me just give you a couple of examples. This is an idiom. Not an idiot, an idiom. You're all giving me that look. Look. Up to the hilt. Maxed out. You know, when you say that, look, what has a hilt? What's originally in the thought process here? A sword. But can you be up to the hilt in something, not be holding a sword at all? See, that's an idiom. In other words, it changes the meaning from what, here's another one. Lose your head. It's not actually talking about you have misplaced this part of your body that sits on your shoulders. Because it's an, okay, Amanda's really laughing at this. This idiom, do you see, if you didn't recognize that was an idiom, you'd be looking at that and saying, well, I wonder where they put it. And how could they go find it if they had lost it? Because how would they see it? You see how ridiculous it would be. The measure of faith is an idiom. The reason you don't recognize it as that is because it doesn't get used much anymore. I'm going to tell you why it doesn't, but there's a reason. Just to jump in feet first, that's an idiom. Put the brakes on, that's an idiom. You don't have to be in a car to understand what it means. Okay, especially if Kim got rear-ended this week. So she's been milking that for all it's worth. But I'm making light of it. She's hurting. But you know what? And thank you for being here. The sufferings of this present time, right? True. Okay. That didn't bring her much comfort right there, did it? So put the brakes on. That's what she wishes the guy behind her had done. But outside of that, you put the brakes on all kinds of things. That's another idiom. Here's the last one I have in your notes. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. That's not something that you have to wait until you get to Italy to have any meaning for you. I remember preaching at the church in Baton Rouge, and we had, as the pews were set up, we had 3 sections just like this, but they were, you know, the old pew style thing. And right over here, where Norma's sitting, in these first several rows, we had a block of deaf people that came. And there was a man on our staff, Larry Goodman, that was our deaf minister. And he would do the signing. And he used to, now you have to understand, I've really mellowed out. In my younger years, I preached fast. And I mean, okay, Ruby's going, it's still like that to me. But I mean, I preached really fast, and Larry used to go, slow down. I can't keep up with what I'm trying to do this, and you're making it hard for me. And so anyway, I was talking about something, and I just used the idiom. I said, he's crooked as a dog's hind leg. And Larry went, really? Because there's no way, because if you're deaf, you get a literal interpretation from the sign language. Someone is as crooked as a dog's hind leg. He's trying to think, because he's definitely going to be talking to them about a dog, you know. So and so he told me later, he went, do not do that. I can't, but I use them so much, they just blurt out of my mouth. All right, so much for that. But this expression, this idiom, and by the way, that's all an idiom really is. It's a phrase or a term or an expression by which the definition is changed because you put these things together this way. There was a time when everyone understood what this expression was about. But it came into disrepute in the period of time in which this country was involved in slavery. Because in the slavery issue, in that, a measure of faith was used a lot to describe something within that. And because of that, it took on a bad connotation. And because it took that on, the use of the phrase kind of fell out of the vocabulary. And so we've done that with other words too. I mean, there are words that we use at one time to mean this, then they actually take on a connotation of something that wasn't good. I'll give you, unless you're as old as me, you won't understand this. But do you remember way back when if you got a square deal, what did that mean? Honest, upright, a good deals, win-win, all of that kind of stuff. But if you remember, when the beatniks came along, if you didn't fit into their way, you were square. And that took on a bad connotation. And you know what? Square fell out of use because of that. That you didn't want to be, you know, nobody wanted to be a square. And I thought, well, if you're not a square, what are you, an oval? I'm not really sure what the big advantage is. You know, maybe you're just a hexagon. You know. So, at any rate, we've seen this happen before. And I'm just giving you the background on what this has as here. At its core, now I'm going to use I'm going to use a couple of ways to illustrate it. I'm not going to use the slave way to illustrate it. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use the employer-employee. I could say master-servant, but I'm going to also use the father-son, because this is a perfect sonship term when it's used this way. And at its core, it has to do with a person who is in authority charging someone who works for them or is somehow under them in the pecking order with a job or a responsibility. And when they have them do that with this important criteria, it's not what I'm looking, but this important understanding, they're not going to be looking over this person's shoulder to make sure they do it, and they're not appointing anyone else in between them to make sure this gets done. It's strictly up to the person that they've given it to, and by their own initiative, they're kind of turned loose on their own to go get this done. That is called a measure of faith. And when someone is dealt a measure of faith, it means something has been, some job, I'm going to say it this way for now, some job has been given to you that you're going to have to go do whatever it takes in order to prepare for and get this job done. And no one is going to be looking over your shoulder. No one's going to be calling you up and going, okay, how far along are you? How's it going? Now, you know what? We use this term kind of in humor sometimes. When someone is always honest, we go, they're a real taskmaster. The taskmaster was never the master. The taskmaster was the one that was appointed by the master to make sure all the work got done. That was the taskmaster. And so what would happen is he would make sure that everything was getting done the way it was supposed to be. But when that guy was out of the picture, and let's say the guy that owned the company, let's do father-son. Here's a father who has a business, and he's going to assign something to his son. And he's going to say, and you know what? It's up to you to get this done. Because I'm not going to come and harass you about it. I'm not going to come and check up on you. And I'm not going to send someone else to find out. Okay, has everybody got this idea down? Because now, having said it that way, well, you know what? It is about you could say, well, all of those phrases are right, but to kind of take it out of that, what's the next verse? If I got that verse back up? No. To take it out of that back to the verse, you know what he could say? I'm putting my faith in you. I'm trusting you to get this done. I'm saying given, we know it's dealt, but I'm giving you a job to do, and now I'm trusting you to get that job done. Because I'm not going to come and make you feel guilty. I'm not going to come and harass you, and I'm not going to look over your shoulder, and I'm not going to threaten you. You're going to have to do this because, and isn't this in perfect accordance with sonship? Because you want to do it. Now, with that in mind, I need to talk to you a little bit about this, because when a father first adopts his son, it's for the purpose of training him in the business. And one of the first things the father does is he brings the son in and he sits him down and he lays it out and he says, this is what you need to understand this whole business is about. And your father did that for you back in Romans 8. And actually, it's actually up here on the board. And although those things, I just asked you, you gave me right answers. I mean, if you gave me a different answer, That's not a bad thing, because I ask you, what were we all given? What were we all have in common? And all of these are correct. All of those are correct. And we were all given a job to do. And that job, we don't have a manager or a supervisor or a, what's another one of those middlemen terms? A micromanager. Okay, that's the extreme of manager. You don't have a manager, you don't have a foreman, you don't have a supervisor, you don't have anybody that overlooks that process for you. In the Bible's terminology, you know what it's saying? You don't have a tutor and governor. You don't have anybody riding herd on that for you. And that's why I can't get up here and do that. The only thing I can do is lead you through the curriculum. Now, that measure, now when let's bring this out. The measure, you could think of that, you could say, that's the job that I'm given to do. The faith is talking about the performance of that job. Because, now I'm going to take you ahead just to show you how this is going to get expanded in the curriculum. In fact, before I do that, let me take you back. You've actually seen this back in Israel's program, this concept. It's a little bit different because it is in Israel's program. But look at the concept that's there. Get back to where I was. Matthew 25:14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to every man. That's funny terminology, isn't it? To every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Now the reason this doesn't work precisely with what we're doing is because they got different amounts of talents. We didn't get, each one got a measure here. We all got the measure. So we'll talk about what that is. So, then he that received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. So now, when it's all said and done, now they're going to have to say, okay, here's what happened. In verse 20, and so he that received 5 talents came and brought other 5, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I've gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, this is the terminology we've always got. We think when we get to heaven, this is what I want to hear the Lord say to me. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful. The measure of faith, that's the faithful performance of the measure that was given to that. Thou good and faithful servant, thou hast been faithful over a few things, make thee rule over many things, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. What's wrong with verse 21? Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Why don't you want to hear that when you get to the heavenly places? Because you're not a servant, you're way better than a servant. You're a son or a daughter. That's way better. Okay, now, I'll give you the short one for the last. Verse 24, then he which had received the 1, I skipped the 2, received the 1 talent, came and said, Lord, I knew that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. I was afraid, and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, thou hast that is thine. There thou hast what that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, thou wicked and slothful servant. Now, again, Israel program. What I'm trying to say is, these men were all given something to do. One of them faithfully discharged it, and something good was said about that. The other one did not. Something was said about that. Now, what I want to do is take you to something that if you're going to say, when I get to heaven, here's really what I'd like to hear from the Lord, this is the phrase you can replace, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Now you can replace this with the dispensation of grace term. That you can say, this is what I'd like to hear. And no doubt will. Titus 2:9. Exhort servants to be obedient unto their own masters. By the way, isn't that isn't that odd that in the very context of this that I'm about to show you, it's still this master-servant relationship, that this is the way it's being presented to them. But he says, exhort servants to be obedient unto their own masters, to please them well in all things, not answering again, not purloining, but showing all good fidelity. What is fidelity? Honesty, integrity. There's another word I'm looking for that'll move you right onto the center of it. Faithfulness. All good fidelity. Do you remember back when you had a hi-fi? Amanda doesn't know what that is, does she? Do you know, Brianne? Okay, Brianne's going to what? All right. Hi-fi. What did hi-fi stand for? High fidelity. And you know what that meant? It was true to the original recording. Guess what? It was in accord. Right? All good fidelity, that they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior in all things. When a task is performed, when a task is assigned, that's the measure of faith that the Father gave to us as His sons and daughters. And at the end, if we do well, we will have, by the way, S-H-E-W, showing all good fidelity. Why not S-H-O-W? Well, that's that poetical Elizabethan English, that blah, blah, blah. That's not what that is. That's what they teach you in college when they have no clue what the Bible is about. You know what S-H-E-W is? It means you're putting that thing on display to be seen. You're not just doing it. It's actually meant to accomplish something by its being seen. And so, showing all good fidelity. By the way, in the same thing, let me just back you up to Ephesians. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling. By the way, he's going to cover every one of these. He doesn't just talk about servants and masters. What else does he talk about? Parents and children. And he talks about the government and the people under the government. He talks about every one of these relationships. But when he does this, he says, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and singleness of your heart, as unto Christ, not with eye service. And what that, I only show you this to say, not like someone's watching. You've got to do this on your own without thinking, the only reason I'm doing that. By the way, do you know why people drive the speed limit? Because someone might be watching. And if you see him parked on the side of the road, when you go by, you are doing the speed limit. That is eye service. I'm not asking you to change that. I'm just saying. Your service, this thing that your Father has given you, has dealt to you, this job He's given you to do, is not supposed to be done because you think someone's watching. Same thing in Colossians 3. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with... You see how he keeps saying this? In other words, he's saying to a servant, don't do the right thing because you think someone is watching. You do the right thing even when someone's not watching. Well, we call that character. That's what we call that. And there's no doubt when God puts this into motion, men are picking up on that, and that's what they're talking. But he's saying, because there's something here that you're... By the way, and there's a reason for doing it. Now, we would say, well, it's just the right thing to do. Well, it is the right thing to do, but there's a reason it's the right thing to do. There's something it's doing, it's producing, that makes it the right thing to do. See, the world just says, well, it's just the right thing to do. It's what shows that we have character. But there's a reason that's beyond that, a bigger reason. And in fact, you know what it ties into? The measure of faith, that job that you were given. Okay, now I'm going to take you back to Romans 12:3, and I don't want you to think that suddenly because I'm using these illustrations that we're in the master-servant relationship with God. He's our Father, and we're His sons and daughters. But what He's going to be doing here by introducing this and going all the way through from Romans chapter 12, verse 3, all the way to verse 8, is to equip us to the task that we got assigned back there in Romans 8. So let me show you the thing in Romans 8. And here it is. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. When we covered this part of Romans 8 was one of the first things that deeply impacted you, because that changed the way you looked at things up there and that you understood what you were going to be doing. And remember what we talked about it, the way we talked about it back there is, if you're going to begin an education with your Father, before you do that, He has to sit you down and tell you something about what this education is going to produce. Why are you involved in it? What is He trying to get done? And then verse 20, for the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of Him who has subjected the same in hope, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. There is a job that this education is equipping us for. And do you know what that was? When you were told that the creature was waiting on you to be manifested, that it was made subject to vanity, and it was going to have to be delivered from the bondage of corruption, you knew already, didn't you, but because of what we did there, that you were going to be involved in that. And now what Paul is doing is coming along in Romans 12 and saying, I have given every single one of you the job of getting this done. But will we all do the same thing to get that done? No. So do you know what you're learning by that? It doesn't matter what your part in that is, because of the body thinking that's being generated in all of this. Your part is just as important as every other part. And I think about when I had a little, when cassette tapes were big, I had a little handheld cassette player. It had a lot of little bells and whistles on it, and then at one point it quit working. And when I took the screws off the back and opened it up, and inside that thing where the tape there was an automatic deal. When you hit the button, the thing would pop out and the little tape deal would come up. Do you know how many little gears and springs and things are in there? That if any one of those quits working, the whole thing is worthless. And you might look at it and say, well, the most important part is the head that comes up and does the playing or the recording. But really, that didn't do you any good at all if one of the little gears had fallen out of place. A dead battery on a car. The whole car is worthless. So when you look at it, you know what? I've told this before. I'm going to tell it again. I feel like that British comedy where the guy was this big-time chef, and the stuff has come together on the plate, and he goes, I need the whatever, I need the sauce, and the guy's going, yes, chef, it's coming. He's trying to get the sauce to firm up, and he goes, I need it now, and the guy's going, yes, chef, I'll be right there. He says, not later, I need it now, and the guy goes, okay, chef, and he grabs it off the oven, and he comes over, and the chef dumps it all in the trash, and he says, you know what the most important part of cooking is? And he goes, what, chef? And he goes, timing. Timing is the most important part of cooking. And then a few minutes later in the episode, he comes over and he tastes something and he goes, oh, do you know what the most important part of cooking is? And the guy goes, timing. He goes, ingredients. Ingredients is the most important part of cooking. And I'm laughing at that because it's just whatever goes wrong. But in a sense, he's right. Because they're all important, right? If the ingredients make it taste bad, does the timing make any difference? If this thing is depending on timing, if you get it right, but the timing is wrong, Well, then now you've ruined that part. So what am I saying? If I'm saying anything at all, I'm saying that this measure of faith that we've been given to do this has been given to every one of us. And when Karen stood back there earlier and said, is it the opportunity? What you said, is it the measure or the opportunity? The measure is the job. That's the job we've been given. And what you do with that, because He's not looking over our shoulder. He's not sending a taskmaster. There is no tutoring governor. There is no foreman or supervisor or manager that's checking up to see if we're staying up with it. He's just going to say at the end, when this is over, either your life is over or the dispensation of grace is over, what you're going to have is what you cared to have. And that will be that. So, He doesn't want us. So if we're going to labor with Him, we truly are, the first thing you understand is, no matter what you're doing in that creature, and there's going to be a lot of things to do, every single one of those things is necessary in order for that to get done. And you can't look around and say, well, the one that did this was the most important, because if something fell through in another part of it, they went. It's like anything that involves a team. If the other members of the team don't do their part, things can't work the way they're designed to work. I don't really like, I don't dislike the word team, but I don't like to use it within the framework of sonship, because this actually goes beyond what we just normally understand as a team. But there's some concepts that do carry over, and what I want to say is that in this assembly, now I have to refine this, because I've given you where you found the measure of faith. But in order to get that done, what have you got to do? In order to do that. Okay, you got to value and esteem everybody the same. But in order to get up there and actually deliver the creature from the bondage of corruption. By the way, and when you get up there, if you do think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, this is not going to work. Mark? You have to get an education to do it, right? You have to learn how to do this. And that's what we're doing here. And since we're doing it here, but see, that was a very roundabout way of saying, remember the context. The context is this local assembly, and right now, you're not specifically delivering the creature from the bondage of corruption. What we're doing now is we're about to learn how to function with each other in this context, so that when we get up there, we all know how to do that job. This is where you're going to learn it. This is where you're going to put it into practice. This is where you're going to get it wrong and where you're going to get it right, and you're going to hone that skill, and then you're going to get so good at it that you're not even going to think much about that anymore. You're going to get so good at it that you're going to say, I've been doing this thing so many times, so for so often, I just kind of default to this. You know, I'll give you a terrible example. We're going somewhere the other day, and because it's the way we always go, I wasn't going there. I went right by where we were going, and Billy said, where are you going? And I went, oh! It was just an automatic. I've done that. I've done it before here. I can remember I was going to go up to the church, and it was at a time when I don't normally do that, but I'd gone to the church every day for work, and so I got sent to a little stop and go. You know what a stop and go is? It's like a 7-Eleven. It was called a stop and go there in Baton Rouge. And I got sent down to the stop and go to pick up something that we needed, and you know what I did? Is I turned a block short, and I turned right, and went all the way up to the church, pulled in the parking lot, turned the engine off, grabbed my keys, got out, and empty parking lot, and I realized, where was I going? I thought, oh, I'm just going up to the store. Automatic. default to that. It will be a good thing, folks, the day that this thinking becomes automatic in us. That we're able to actually, that's just where we automatically go to. All right. So how does knowing this keep you from thinking about yourself more highly than you ought to think? And how does this make you see everybody else as a part of a body of which you are a part, and all of those parts are important? How does this establish the equality that I was talking to you about earlier? What have I got left? We got time to do this. In this assembly, every single person, don't get scared by this, please. Please don't get scared by this. Please. I'm begging you. It's nothing to be scared of. Every single person in this assembly, you know you're important, yes? Nobody's nodding their head because you're wondering what's the other shoe that's dropping here. Every single member of this assembly is to have an office. Don't think of that like, oh no. There are some offices that you're normally familiar with. Pastor is an office. Deacon is an office. Those are Bible offices. But those are offices that we understand generally. Every member of this body is to have an office. Not one of those two. You don't have to be one of those two. But there are offices that are going to be pointed out. And you get to choose the office that you function in. I don't get to assign it, and you're not going to just go, well, which one does God want me to have? He wants you to have the one you want. You're a son. What is one of the first things you understand? You have liberty in your decision making. So He's not going to come along now and pin you in. You have an office. Oh, look, I know you all got that. Look, I feel like I've come out into the pasture with a hot shot behind my back and everybody's looking at me. This is not, let me use Monica for example. Monica's up the hospital in the ER area. Everybody has something to do in that ER. They don't all do the same thing, do they? But it takes everybody, if that thing is going to work right, it takes everybody doing their part. This local body is really meant to do something besides you show up, listen to me flap my gums for 2 hours, and then go home. It's actually meant now to start putting into practice the things that education is teaching us. We're going to, this sounds dangerous, we're going to practice on each other. Thank God it's not medical stuff. Okay? I don't want, because I'm going to be selective about that. But this is where this is the laboratory. Do you know what that means? You're coming to class in the exact same room. You're going to go into the laboratory and start working. I keep thinking the experiment on Frankenstein. My mind just keeps going with this terminology. But this is where that is going to be made possible. If we can't do this here, we will not automatically show up there and get that done, right? And it's good, isn't it? Isn't that the way you want it? Can I practice this a few times? Can I get a feel for this before I'm called on to go up and do this monumental thing that I've just heard about? Don't you want to put your hands on it and, let me step on the brake and see how that feels. Every car is a little different, right? Let me see how this handles. When you go buy another car, don't you want to drive it? You want to see how this feels. And if you're going down the road and it feels like you're riding in a log truck and you're about to have kidney damage, you know what you're saying to yourself? This doesn't have the ride I want. I'm going to keep looking. Well, that's why you try it out. And so in this particular case, what we're talking about is We're talking about every one of us being charged to occupy an office in this local assembly in which we're going to learn to put all the aspects of our education into practice, and none of those offices are better than any other office. They're all a necessary part of the chorus. They're all the various notes that make up an entire melody. They're all needed. So, in verses, and that's why, just to look at the two verses that are coming up here to take us back to Romans 12, look, you're being told here in these next verses, let me just say it and I'll put it up. You're not the only son. You're not the only daughter. We're in this together. There's an according that goes on here. So, good, this is perfect. Romans 12:4. For as we have many members in one body, and that's true right here, just like it's true in the body of Christ. And all members have not the same. Do you see what we're about to get introduced to here? But before he introduces these offices, I got to come along and deal with this, not thinking of yourself more highly than you ought to think. You've got to see everybody else as vital. Remember, I told you a time or two past that there's going to come a point when someone's missing, even when it's for a legitimate reason, you're going to look around and go, man, I just feel like we're just not complete here. Because now we're actually dependent on each other to be able to function as a body. So, we all have not the same office. Look again in verse 5. We're interdependent upon each other. So we, being many, are one body in Christ, and everyone members one of another. In other words, it's when someone looks at this body, this local church, we ought to be functioning so that they don't see where Wayne leaves off and Monica takes up, and where she leaves off and Clinton starts. Because this thing is really functioning as a body. When you see me do something, he dropped his marker. You didn't go, did you see that thumb and first two fingers drop that marker? I've been wondering about them anyway. That's not how you do that. You see that as me. And you talk about me like it's just one thing. It's a C-O-R-D. It's a lot of fibers that make up a single cord. And that's the way we're going to be. And God is going to take us and twist us together into a cord, and we're going to squeeze up. Barbara's pounding us into a single. And that way we actually function that way. And as a cord, well, we'll be able to strangle anybody we want. I'm just trying to say there's a reason for doing this. And it's not, someone on the DVD now is all upset. We're not strangling anybody. But if we did, it would be with godly love. I just want to make that clear. And there is more strength, isn't it? You know, you can just take a thread and wrap it around you in an armchair, and you can pop that. No, wrap that thing about 15 times, and you might pop it, but it's a lot harder, and you wrap it 50 times, and even though it's just a little thread, 50 of those is tough. Now you've got something. And by the way, our cord is not going to be huge. But if it's but you know what? Can I say this? No other cord is more important than this cord. And this cord isn't going to be more important than some other cord. Because what God means when He takes the entire body of Christ up to the creature is He's just going to take all the cords and twist them together into a cable. Maybe I should have said a rope. I don't know. I'm not sure. It breaks down. The Bible doesn't talk about ropes and cables.
Mike, if you think about like a big fishing net, you have to have each cord, they all have to be together.
That's a good idea, the fishing net. All those cords tied together, all linked together. And you know what? That's how we think about it, as a single net. That's a good illustration. So that's the thinking that's going to be in us here. And so I do need to say a couple of other things about this. Say it when we come back, because I need us to be able to take off from this into verse 4. But those few things that I'm going to say to you are going to be what? Now, you need to start thinking about this week. Because knowing we have all been given the measure of faith, which is the equivalent to the Father saying, you know what you're supposed to do, and I'm not going to look over your shoulder that you do it. There's not anybody riding herd on you. There's nobody riding herd on this assembly, and there's nobody riding herd on us as individual members of this assembly. But we know what we're tasked with, and we know what we've got to do, and we know that to get that done, we have got to be able to function in this assembly first. Now, does that scare anybody? Does everybody get what I'm talking about? Okay. This is good. I mean, this really is. This wasn't quite as much fun for you as it was for me, but you know what? When I looked at that, a lot of things fell into my head about this that I thought, you know what? He has given us all the same measure of faith. And we're all, look, I'll just say this and I'll end it. Let's suppose everybody in this room becomes a fully educated son. No matter what position you're put in the creature, isn't that what you want to be? I mean, that's what I want to, because, and it doesn't matter where he puts me. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter like I don't care to do it. I'm saying wherever he wants to put me. In fact, if he said, look, Mike, I really need you here. That's not about me looking at it and saying, oh, well, I thought I was going to get this or that. If he needs me here, then you know what? I want to be fully educated in that position so that I'll know everything I need to have done. I don't want my position to be that, I'm getting off into something. I don't want it to be that weak link, but that's not exactly what I mean to say. I want to function wherever he needs me to function. And in this local assembly, we're going to learn to value and esteem each other. If Kim is the gear and Audie is the wheel and Brianna is the band that runs over to this side to another sprocket and gear that turns a stem that actually makes something else happen somewhere else, if that's it, I want us to be able to look and recognize, man, that Kim is a great sprocket. That's a good nickname for her. I think we should just start calling her that. Oh, she's going, no. Look, she's just trying to be humble. Just call her Sprocket. Now, but really, you'll look and you'll say, I see the value of everybody here making us become what it is that we're becoming. Okay, all right. Do you have that idea? All right. Okay, we'll have a word of prayer. You think about that this week, and then we'll finish it off and move on next week. Father, thank you for the time that these folks always give of their time for this. I don't ever see anybody looking at their watch or worrying about what's going on. I know that they want this. They're eager to get it. They want this education and what it's going to produce. I believe that this assembly wants it for the right reason. And I pray, Lord, that the things that we've looked at here in verse 3, we'll go home, we'll look at that, we'll understand it, and it'll do its effectual work to cause us not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think, but to understand that this measure of faith that verse 3 talks about was given to every single one of us, and we're going in this local assembly, in the offices that will be given in this assembly, we're going to begin to put that thing into practice so that when we get into the creature, we'll be found in all good fidelity. That we'll be able to faithfully perform the measure that was dealt to us for the creature and for its benefit. And I pray, Lord, that this would impact us the right way and produce